My romantic rival posted an Instagram update with 2 photos. The first was a screenshot of an Instagram conversation, the one I sent to Daniel after we broke up, begging him to come back. It was a very long message, and with every single character and punctuation mark, I trampled my pride and dignity underfoot. The second photo showed Daniel, head down, peeling shrimp for her. Her caption read, "Hahaha. He's also the one some other girl dreams about." She added a smug little emoji at the end. My world collapsed in that moment. Chapter 1. I suddenly realized I didn't love him anymore. It was a strange feeling. This person who once lived beside me day and night, the one I used to love. Now, when I looked at him, I felt nothing, not a ripple inside me. The tiny gestures that used to make my heart race now left me unmoved. When I looked at him, it felt like looking at just another random person on the street. But I didn't show a thing. I still took care of him as usual. Breakfast ready on the dining table by 7 a.m. A glass of lukewarm water on the nightstand just right for drinking. Toothpaste already squeezed onto the toothbrush in the bathroom. Before leaving, I even adjusted the AC with the remote to make the room a bit warmer. Then stood at the bedroom door and said, "I'm heading to work." His whole face was buried in the white bedding, and he mumbled a sleepy response. I turned and left. I recently took on a new project, and the whole team was swamped, heads spinning. By the time we'd wrapped up the initial proposal details and I checked the clock, it was almost 1 a.m. That's when I realized I hadn't thought about him once all day. That wasn't normal. I remembered when I had just graduated. Back then, I was working on events with a senior who had left school years before. Even though we were always busy late into the night, I'd text Daniel every hour, giving him updates on what I was doing. If it got past 6, I'd tell him how late I'd be working and remind him not to wait for me. Even after we'd been together a long time, I still let him know when I was busy. But today, I hadn't thought of him once. I opened Instagram and saw that he had messaged me around 7 p.m. asking when I'd be home. I hadn't even seen it. I'd never taken more than 3 minutes to reply to him before. I rubbed my phone, hesitating, but in the end, I didn't reply. Walking out of the office building, I finally saw him. He was leaning casually against his big G-Wagon, tall and slender, the silhouette of his body sharp in the dark. He was looking down at his phone, a faint flash of crimson at his lips catching the light. He was smoking again. I actually really hated him smoking. His father died of liver cancer. When we first got together, I'd always stop him from smoking. Every time, he would raise an eyebrow and flash a half smile at me, then keep smoking anyway. I knew I couldn't stop him. In love, the one who loves more is always the more humble one. Our relationship had been imbalanced from the very start. I humbled myself too much. That's why I could never control him. I walked up slowly. He must have been deep in thought, because he didn't even notice me approach. I softly asked, "Why are you here?" He snapped out of it, a bit flustered, quickly took the cigarette from his lips and crushed it underfoot. That's when I noticed the ground was littered with cigarette butts. Who knows how many he had smoked. I instinctively wanted to tell him to cut back, opened my mouth to speak, but said nothing in the end. That was when I realized, in despair, I didn't want to care anymore. He looked at me for a while, like he was waiting for something. In the darkness, there seemed to be flickers of light in his eyes. Then they dimmed again. His voice was hoarse from smoking as he said, "I came to pick you up." He paused, then added, sounding slightly aggrieved, "You didn't reply to my message." I put on a show, pulled out my phone and glanced at it, then said, "I was too busy. Didn't see it." He said nothing more and opened the car door for me. That was unusually thoughtful of him. I had always been too easy for him to win over, and my love for him had been too humble, I suppose. To him, the one thing he was most certain of was that I would never leave him. So I came when he called, left when he waved me off. Apart from that one period when guilt briefly got the better of him, he'd never again come to pick me up after I worked late. Chapter 2. Once in the car, I leaned against the window, staring blankly at the stream of lights flashing past outside. The entire car was steeped in silence. I was reminded of the past. He had always been a bit aloof. Back when it was just the two of us, I would keep thinking of topics to make him talk. He would occasionally reply with a hum or two. But now, I was too tired. After a while, he asked me, "Have you eaten?" I gave a soft mem. I didn't ask if he had eaten, I didn't even realize I had fallen asleep until he gently woke me up. He frowned as he looked at me and said, "You've been really tired lately, right? If you're tired, just take a break. That job doesn't really matter. I can support you, can't I?" I said nothing. In the past, when I was too exhausted, I was the one who asked him that question. Back then, his business was finally getting on track. I was killing myself with work every day, exhausted by the internal politics of the company. One night after working late, I clung to his waist and asked coquettishly, "What if I quit and came home? Give you a chance to take care of me?" He smiled, changed the subject, patted my head, and said, "Lucy, keep going, keep pushing." After that, I never asked something that silly again, and now that he said it to me, I just looked up at him and smiled, without saying a word. Just like he used to. I used to love him so deeply that even my friends were shocked. Half joking, half serious. They warned me, "Lucy, don't fall too hard." But I was like a moth drawn to flame. From the first moment I saw him, I knew I wouldn't come out of this unharmed. I met Daniel in my sophomore year. Before that, I had only heard of him. He was a campus legend at a university. His careless, indifferent demeanor and handsome face made him wildly popular with the girls. They said his girlfriends were as numerous as fish crossing the river. The fact that I, in the end, managed to win and become the official girlfriend. I thought about it for a long time and could only chalk it up to fate. Fate had him meet me at the lowest point of his life. Fate had him just happen to pull himself together at that time. Fate made it so he didn't meet another foolish girl who treated him like I did during that period. So I became his girlfriend, and from then on, it was an on and off entanglement that lasted 7 years, long enough to stun both our friends. According to one of his buddies, we were never people from the same world. I was someone with clear goals, top of my class. My life carefully planned out at every stage. He was the opposite, carefree about everything, taking life one step at a time, never truly investing himself in anything. Not only was he indifferent, but also unfaithful, flitting through the flowers of this world, never letting a single leaf truly stick. Well, no, that's not entirely true. There was a time he did care. When I met him, he had just ended his last relationship, and even though I was with Daniel for 7 long years, Sandra was the only ex whose name made my heart clench with fear. I think she was probably the only girl he ever truly fell for. The first time I saw Daniel was at a student club event. He was leaning against the doorway, looking down at his phone. His profile was sharply defined, almost like it had been carved. I couldn't help but glance at him a few more times. A younger student beside me sighed half enviously and muttered, "That's Daniel. He's probably waiting for his girlfriend." I followed her gaze and saw the back of a tall girl with long curls. I didn't see her face, but she must have been beautiful. The second time I saw him was late at night, off campus. I had gone to a city to represent the school in a university competition. After the event ended, I rushed back to campus overnight. It was pouring rain. I got out of the taxi and ran through the downpour toward the school gates, and that's when I saw him. At first, I didn't recognize him, just a shadow slumped in the corner near the campus wall. I hesitated, then turned on my phone's flashlight and walked over. It was him, passed out, slumped against the wall, his hair drenched by the rain and plastered to his forehead. All the arrogance and casual coolness he usually carried were gone. He looked pitiful. Maybe I'd already lost all reason at that point. I didn't hesitate. I called a taxi and took him to the hospital. He had drunk too much, and the storm had triggered a high fever. Later, I'd often joke with him, saying I saved his life that night. Whether I saved him or not, I don't know. I just know I nearly threw my own life away in the process. I stayed by his bedside until he woke up. His eyes were still dazed. I smiled at him and said, "Hi, Daniel. I'm Luciana. Last night's hospital bill was 2,456 yuan. The taxi cost 147. Add me on Instagram and transfer it to me." Once he came to, he narrowed his eyes and gave me that familiar lazy smile, that nonchalant charm that made my heart beat like a war drum. He stayed in the hospital for 7 days. I brought him chicken soup every single day. On the day he was discharged, he finally remembered my name. He curled his lips into a grin and asked, "Are you chasing me?" Sunlight filtered through the small hospital window, dust motes drifting in the air. I feigned calm and shot back, "You only just figured that out?" I pursued him for 6 months and 3 days. On the 4th day, which happened to be Christmas, we were having dinner at a restaurant off campus. I was focused on peeling shrimp for him when I heard him say, "Luciana, let's be together." My hands froze. I paused for a long time. In the end, I didn't look up. I just kept peeling shrimp and softly replied, "Okay." Such an insignificant and quiet beginning. He never mentioned love, never talked about feelings, just a light, fleeting suggestion to be together, and I flung myself toward him with all my heart. But I was genuinely happy, so happy that after dinner, I took a taxi alone to the hospital and sat for an hour getting in 4 drip. Because I'm allergic to seafood, I really was full of joy. Chapter 3. The next morning, I woke up and it was already 8 o'clock, unusually late for me. I must have been truly exhausted the night before. When I opened my eyes, I was lying flat on my back, perfectly still, even under the covers. I felt a chill. He hated heat, so the AC in the room was always set to the lowest temperature. When we first moved in together, I wasn't used to it. I'd often be jolted awake in the middle of the night from the cold, then wrap myself in the blanket and burrow into his arms, limbs curling around him like I was hugging a furnace. At first, he was very annoyed. He wasn't used to anyone sleeping on him like that. Every time I rolled over, he'd impatiently push me away. But not long after, I would unconsciously drift back over, and he'd end up waking me several times in one night. I just couldn't break the habit. Eventually, he got used to it. But lately, though I can't say exactly when, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, I woke up one morning and suddenly realized something. I hadn't woken up in his arms for a very, very long time. Every night when I felt cold in my sleep, I would instinctively curl up into myself, even though he was right there beside me, even though I could feel the warmth of his body not far away. Even in that half-asleep fog, I no longer reached out to him. That couldn't be a good sign. This morning, surprisingly, he got up before me, barefoot on the carpet. He made no sound as he walked out of the room. I saw him standing on the balcony, smoking. It was early, and he wore a frown. Clearly something was weighing on him. His face was still as handsome as the day I met him. I looked at him for a long time, and then realized my heart didn't stir in the slightest. He must have felt my gaze. Cigarette in his mouth. He looked up and met my eyes. We stared silently at each other through the glass, just a short distance apart. Only when the ash on his cigarette had grown long did he finally take it out and press it into the ashtray. After the smoke cleared a bit, he came back inside. I casually said, "You should cut back a little." He was quiet for a long time. Then I heard him let out a soft hum in acknowledgement. When I came out of the bathroom after brushing my teeth, he had already gone out and come back with breakfast. He'd gone all the way to the Bowsy shop across the complex. The one he said had the best dumplings. I used to buy them for him every morning. I asked what fillings they were. He said, 2 crab roe, 2 lobster, the exact ones I used to get for him. I silently put the half-eaten bun back into the bag. He looked surprised and raised his brow, questioning me without a word. I was genuinely tired. A wave of weariness suddenly crashed over me. I said, "I'm allergic to seafood." Actually, it had gotten much better. Maybe after all those years of peeling shrimp and crabs for him, I had built up a resistance. I had endured it for so many years. But now, suddenly, the things I once tolerated with a smile, I just couldn't anymore. He stared at me, watching closely. I thought, if this had been before, if he looked at me like that, I would have wrapped my arms around him and kissed his lips. His expression shifted slightly. He raised his hand, maybe to touch my hair, or my cheek. But before I could even think, I stepped back instinctively and avoided his touch. His hand froze awkwardly in the air. I watched him turn his head abruptly to take a deep breath. And when he looked back again, his face was calm. He said, "What filling do you like? I'll go back down and get something else." We were both pretending everything was fine, maintaining the illusion of peace. I said, "It's okay. I'll go fry an egg in the kitchen." He said nothing. I noticed the hand at his side had curled into a fist. He wasn't someone with a good temper. I'd seen him lose it before. Back in college, once, when a creepy guy harassed me, Daniel nearly beat him half to death. We ended up paying a hefty hospital bill. After graduation, during the early days of his startup, he had to swallow his pride for a while. But as his business grew, Fewer and fewer people dared challenge him. Most people just went along with him. Just when I thought he was about to snap, he suddenly laughed. Then he said gently, "Okay, let's go shopping later. The seasons are changing, we need to restock the house." Honestly, I felt a strange sense of disappointment when he held back his temper. After 7 years together, we knew each other's temperaments and moods too well. He must have sensed my coldness and detachment. A part of me hoped he would get angry, point at me, and ask, "What's wrong with you? Can't you just say it?" Then I could respond naturally, "I don't love you anymore. Let's break up." But he didn't ask, so I didn't say it. That afternoon, we went to the supermarket together. I've always loved grocery shopping, doing mundane things together, pushing a cart through aisles, picking out household items. It made us feel like an ordinary couple. Back then, I used to want to spend all day at the supermarket with him. Every few steps, I'd ask, "Does this look cute? This would look great in the kitchen. Haha. Look at that. Should we get matching toothbrush cups? They're adorable. This would look perfect by the front door." Eventually, he'd get so annoyed that he'd yell, "Shut up!" just to get me to stop for 5 minutes. I was always overflowing with joy around him. I wanted to share everything I thought was wonderful with him. That happiness was genuine. Just being by his side, no matter what we were doing, even if it was just breathing, made me happy. In other people's eyes, I was mature and aloof. But today, after walking around for half an hour, I glanced into the shopping cart and realized we'd barely spoken, and had only picked up a few essentials. I told him, "That's everything. Let's go home." He was quiet on the way back. Just before we got home, he finally said, "You've been really tired lately, haven't you? Once this project's done, why don't you take some time off? Let's go on a trip to M City. You've always wanted to go, right?" He paused, then added, "What I said before about quitting your job and letting me take care of you, I wasn't joking." Honestly, I felt suffocated. Daniel had always been emotionally distant. He feared responsibility, especially the burden of someone else's emotions. Back then, he was afraid of bearing my feelings. Now, he was afraid of bearing my life. Hearing him say that, once upon a time, I would have been moved to tears. But now, I wasn't. I was startled for a second. Then I gently turned him down. "No need. I like my job." The rejection was too direct. Too harsh, especially since I'd barely ever said no to him before. Somehow, without realizing it, Daniel and I had completely switched roles. I had become the detached, indifferent one. He was the one compromising, holding back. I watched him take a deep breath. I'd said it before, he really didn't have a good temper. But after a pause, he smiled softly again and said, "Then what about M City? Once you're done with work, let's go on a little vacation." I gave him a polite, distant smile and said, "I've already been." Daniel, I went there 4 years ago, by myself. Chapter 4. We once had a huge breakup. In fact, over the course of our 7-year relationship, Daniel and I broke up and got back together many times. But the only time we truly uttered the word breakup was 4 years ago. That breakup was ugly, devastating. At the time, I was drained of all hope and enthusiasm for life, and I genuinely doubted if I could survive it. 4 years ago, I had just started working. I was mentally and physically exhausted, and because of that, I no longer had the energy to keep accommodating Daniel or taking care of him. Naturally, I didn't notice anything strange about his behavior either, like how he started smoking more frequently, how he spent longer stretches staring blankly into space, how he started coming home later and later. It hit me only one night after working late. When I opened the door and found the lights blazing, he was sitting on the living room sofa. The balcony door was shut, and the air was thick with smoke. The ashtray was overflowing with cigarette butts. He was slouched against the cushions, the crystal chandelier above casting light on him. There was nowhere for his emotions to hide. Expressionless, he said, "Let's break up." Then he let out a long, heavy sigh. "I'm sorry." Sandra's back. I don't even want to recall that hollow, weightless period of my life. I've always been a calm, independent person. When I saw friends suffer for love, I used to sneer. I believed love had to be mutual, that only a two-way street could be called a relationship. Simply put, I believed you could live without love, But you must always have dignity. But after Daniel broke up with me, I became the very kind of person I used to look down on. It felt like someone had carved my heart out with a dull knife. I lost over 10 pounds in a week, bombarding him with countless pathetic, pleading messages, every single one of them met with silence. Eventually, a friend couldn't take it anymore and slapped me hard. She was furious. Disappointed, Luciana. Have some self-respect. Will you? Forget him. Start a new life. While you're here falling apart, he's probably out there having the time of his life. Can't you try to be happy too? The tears I had held back for so long finally broke free. I said to her, word by word, with absolute despair, I don't know if he's happy, Nicole, but I know one thing, I'll never be happy again. The only way I could feel happy again is to go back in time. To go back to when he was still beside me. I don't care whether he loves me or not, as long as he's by my side. That's enough. That's the only way I can be happy. So pathetic. Nicole looked at me for a long time, then turned away to wipe her own eyes. It took more than 5 months before I could return to some semblance of a normal life. My friends thought I had recovered, but I was like a rat living in the shadows of a sewer, secretly stalking their social media profiles. They traveled together, celebrated holidays together. He gave her grand surprises. They posted sweet videos and photos together. In the first 3 years I was with him, we didn't take a single photo together. He didn't like smiling, and he didn't smile in photos with Sandra either, but the atmosphere between them was warm. The Daniel in those pictures wasn't indifferent or dismissive like he was with me. He looked down at the girl beside him, his eyes and expression gentle. That was something I never got. What really crushed me was one of Sandra's social media posts. She shared an Instagram update with 2 photos. The first was a screenshot of an Instagram message, the one I sent Daniel after our breakup, begging him to come back. It was a very long message, in which I stomped on my pride and dignity, word by word, punctuation mark by punctuation mark. The second photo was of Daniel, head down, peeling shrimp for her. Her caption read, "Hahaha. This is also the guy some other girl's been yearning for." She added a smug emoji at the end. That was the moment my world came crashing down. I thought I might actually die in that moment. But somehow, I survived. After that, I went to City alone. While crossing the Sahara Desert, I nearly buried myself in the endless orange-red dunes. But I came back. I returned to my old life. I slept normally, socialized normally, worked normally, and when someone mentioned Daniel, I could even smile and brush it off like it meant nothing, until he and Sandra broke up again. In truth, their personalities were never suited to stay together. One was too aloof and indifferent. The other, too proud and domineering. When conflict arose, neither of them was capable of compromise. Just like that song by Yoga Lin, You and She. It didn't work out. Barely half a year, and you began to fall apart. My love, it stayed the same. Even I admire my own persistence. So, on the 28th day after they broke up, I sent Daniel a message. I asked him if he wanted to grab a drink. He came, and then, we got back together. That decision shocked everyone around me. Nicole was furious. She pointed at my nose and yelled for me to wake up, even threatening to cut ties with me if that's what it would take to knock some sense into me. But I couldn't help it. I'm composed, rational, but I couldn't control my heart. I watched blankly as Nicole clutched her chest in frustration, and I said to her, if I could, I would cut this heart out of my chest with a knife. I know he's not worth it, Nicole, but I really can't help myself. I know I've already made myself small enough to be dust. But Nicole, when he came back to me, I was genuinely happy. I really was happy. It wasn't until Nicole came over and started wiping the tears off my face with a tissue that I realized I'd been crying without even noticing. Who doesn't want to be decisive and strong in love? Who doesn't want to stand above it all, proud and unmoved by someone else's affections? Who wants to lift a heart that's already been ground into dust and hand it back to the same person to trample again? I didn't want to either, but I had no choice. I truly had no choice. As long as there was even a sliver of a chance to stay by his side, I was willing to disregard everything else. As long as my heart kept beating, there was nothing I could do about it. Chapter 5. But what I truly never expected was that one day, my feelings for Daniel would stop beating before my own heart did. I couldn't pinpoint the beginning. I didn't even know when I started falling out of love with him. In recent years, he had actually treated me very well. Even Nicole, who used to worry the most, sometimes sighed and said, "It's a good thing you made it through those awful years." Daniel now? He's like the perfect husband, rich, handsome, not even interested in other women. You really turned the tide. I just smiled, saying nothing. At first, I thought maybe I was just in a phase, a bout of emotional fatigue, something that would pass. I could see Daniel trying to be cautious, holding back his temper more than ever. Perhaps, aside from Sandra, he had never compromised so much for anyone in his life. But every time I saw him, I felt irritable and unsettled. This went on for a while. I finally softened during a feverish cold. I was lying in bed, lightheaded and dazed, when I groggily woke up. The room was completely silent. I leaned against the wall, dizzy, and slowly made my way out to the living room to get some water, only to see him in the kitchen making porridge. His tall frame slightly bent, standing by a clay pot, muttering under his breath, "Simmer on low heat for 30 minutes. I drank some water quietly and silently returned to bed. I don't know how much time passed before he came in to wake me up. On the table was a container of porridge from a familiar takeout place. I didn't ask. After dinner, while he was clearing the table, he clumsily bumped into something, letting out a quiet hiss. I looked up immediately. What happened? He hesitated, then held out his hand with a slight pout, showing me a shiny blister on the back of it, clearly a burn. I was trying to cook porridge. What happened to it? He paused, then replied, "It didn't turn out right, so I poured it down the drain." He was probably just trying to act pitiful. Back when he fought for Sandra and broke a bone, he didn't even make a sound. A small burn like this didn't mean anything to him. And yet, something in me softened strangely. My body reacted before my mind. I pulled his hand over and gently blew on the wound, then asked, "Did you put ointment on it?" The moment his hand was in mine, it stiffened. Before I could react, he suddenly pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. His chin pressed against the top of my head, squeezing me so hard my bones ached. But I stayed still, letting him hold me. After a while, I heard him speak, his voice low, soft, as though afraid of waking something. "Lucy, stay like this. Don't become someone I don't recognize." I didn't answer him. We seemed to fall back into our old rhythm. I was always good at hiding my emotions. But after that, I no longer knew whether what we had between us was love settling into routine, or just habit, and whether I was only waiting for some kind of outburst to break everything open. I never expected that breaking point to come so soon. After we wrapped up the second quarter project, the team organized a dinner to celebrate and unwind. Before leaving the office, I texted Daniel. Lately, when he had nothing to do, he often came to pick me up. He replied quickly, "Okay, I'll wait for you at home." I looked at the message, lips curling into a faint smile. Dinner ended close to 11 p.m. Because there were many people on the project, we had booked a private room. On the way out, passing through the lobby, I casually glanced around and saw Sandra. She had always been my nightmare. This woman, not even particularly outstanding, managed to shatter my psychological defenses every time she appeared. I would involuntarily feel defeated, inferior. It was a trauma from my younger years, a scar too deep to fade. My breath caught slightly under the brilliant lights of the hotel lobby. She was all smiles, familiar yet distant. Then I shifted my gaze and saw the man sitting across from her. I knew Daniel so well that I could sense his presence from 5 meters away, let alone recognize him from the back of his head. Just a few hours ago, he had texted me that he'd be at home, waiting for me. Maybe the shock only lasted a second. Once I registered what I was seeing, my mind cleared completely. All the emotions that had been churning inside me disappeared in an instant. Sandra looked up, saw me, froze for a beat, then gave me a polite nod and a reserved smile. I smiled back and walked over. Daniel paled. He looked at me and blurted out, almost instinctively, "I didn't lie to you." I said calmly, "What's the big deal about an old friend's dinner? Sandra's rarely in town. It's only right for you to host." His expression was strange, like he hadn't expected this reaction. His eyes searched mine, almost as if examining me. I smiled again and said, "Do you have the house key?" "I forgot mine." He stood up reflexively, grabbing his coat off the chair. "I'll go with you." I shook my head. No need. Who leaves a dinner halfway? You guys carry on. I'm heading back. I don't know how natural or composed I looked. But strangely, this woman, whose name used to terrify me, meant nothing to me now. Even when I saw Daniel sitting with her, my heart was completely quiet. I even went home, took a shower, and couldn't remember exactly when I fell asleep. Chapter 6. I woke up again in the middle of the night. There was a dark silhouette on the living room sofa. A faint red glow flickering between his fingers, the smell of smoke filled the air. I coughed twice from the heaviness of it, then turned on the light. He sat silently on the sofa. I startled a little and asked, "Why aren't you sleeping?" He didn't answer. I stood in the doorway, watching him. He stubbed out his cigarette in the ashtray, then finally spoke. "There's really nothing going on between me and her. After you sent that text, she called me. I didn't pick up. Then she said she's moving to settle in H City for good. This was her last trip back, and she just wanted to say a proper goodbye." I nodded. "Okay, I get it." I opened the living room sliding door, looked at him, and asked, "Why haven't you showered yet?" He ignored the question and continued, "I was so afraid you'd get the wrong idea. I was running home the whole way, thinking about how I'd explain it to you. Especially when I got here and the house was dark, I thought you were gone. But when I turned on the light and saw you sleeping in the bedroom, you were sleeping so soundly, you didn't even hear me come in." He looked up at me, his handsome face now weary and bleak, the corners of his eyes red. Word by word, he said, "In that moment, I almost wished you had left." I hesitated and tried to explain softly, "Sorry. I was just really tired today." "Do you still care about me?" He interrupted abruptly. "Do you still care about me? I don't know if you've noticed, you haven't reached out to me in so long. You don't nag me to quit smoking anymore. You don't give in to me like you used to. At night, even when I set the air conditioning too low, you don't curl up next to me anymore. Did you even notice I quit smoking 3 months ago?" I was at a loss for words. I couldn't refute anything he said. I didn't even know when all of these signs started. It wasn't because I fell for someone else. He hadn't changed either. But I had. Just stopped loving him. He looked at me in silence, then agitatedly pulled another cigarette from the coffee table, lighting it up. He seemed increasingly restless. He'd always had a bad temper, shrouded in smoke. He asked in a tone that bordered on defeat, "What do you want, Luciana? Do you want to break up?" I was quiet for a long time before I finally picked up his question and answered, "Okay, let's break up." It was the first time I had ever said it. The cigarette in his hand dropped onto the table. He stood up and kicked the coffee table so hard it slid diagonally across the floor. His eyes were red as he shouted at me, "Fine. Break up. You think I can't live without you?" Then he slammed the door behind him with a deafening crash. I had no idea where he went. Maybe he spent the night in the car. I stood where I was for an hour, then started packing. When the first light of dawn crept in, I left with my things and went to Nicole's place. Nicole was furious. She pointed at me and demanded, "Tell me, is it that bastard again? Did he hurt you again?" I hadn't slept all night. I was so sleepy I kept nodding off. I shook my head and replied, "Nicole." I agreed to it. That sentence had been circling in my mind for weeks, maybe longer, but this was the first time I said it out loud. So tired, and somehow, a little relieved, like I had finally embraced the version of myself from 4 years ago, the one who had been so crushed by betrayal that she almost suffocated beneath the red sands of the Sahara. I finally said, "I don't love him anymore, Nicole. I really don't love him anymore." She stared at me, stunned, mouth wide open in disbelief, like she was looking at someone she didn't recognize. Chapter 7. I went to the Sahara again, standing atop the vast, boundless desert. I got a call from Nicole. She spoke hesitantly. "That guy came, said he's here to take you home. He's lost a lot of weight. Looks kind of pitiful." But she quickly changed her tone and said, "I kicked him out. When are you coming back?" Then, as if still unwilling to let it go, she asked one more time with a trace of struggle, "So it's really over this time? No chance at all?" I smiled but didn't say a word. In the end, Nicole betrayed me. When I got off the plane back home, I saw Daniel. He really had lost a lot of weight, though he still looked composed. When he saw me, He smiled cautiously, almost nervously. I came to take you home, he said. I didn't make a fuss. Once I got in the car, I simply said, thanks, just drop me off at Nicole's. He gripped the steering wheel in silence. A long time passed before he finally said, I was wrong, okay? I was wrong. For someone as proud as him, I knew he probably had never said those words to anyone else before. I really was wrong. After you left, that house felt empty. Without you there, I couldn't stay even a minute. He took a deep breath, closed his slightly reddened eyes, and pulled a small box from his pocket. He held it out to me. Let's get married, Luciana. It would be a lie to say I wasn't shocked. Someone like him, if I had to compare, was like the wind, free, unrestrained. He had always feared commitment, even during the time when I loved him most. I had never dared to imagine that he would one day propose to me, but aside from the shock, I felt nothing else. What puzzled me for so long was this. Why had the girl who once loved Daniel so desperately, who clung to him even when he crushed her into the dirt, suddenly changed when everything had finally settled down? I thought about it endlessly, until I returned once more to the place I had visited 4 years ago, and I finally understood. I was never someone capable of great forgiveness. Even amidst the flood of time, I had never forgotten the despair I felt back then. I still remembered every plea, every humiliation, every time I gave in with no bottom line, no self-respect. All those nights filled with hopelessness and self-loathing. The thoughts of giving up on everything, those didn't just disappear. They fermented slowly over the 4 years after Daniel and I got back together. Turns out, I never truly forgot the pain, and somewhere along the way, my love eroded little by little, until all that was left was the Luciana who had managed to salvage what little dignity and self-respect she had left. This girl, slow to react, taking all these years to finally realize, she needed to love herself first. When I pushed away Daniel's ring, I was unbelievably calm. I knew I wouldn't regret my decision. I looked at him, shook my head, and said, gently, apologetically, and with complete peace, I'm sorry, Daniel. I don't love you anymore. He seemed to have seen this coming. After a long silence, his eyes red. He gave a faint smile and asked, you don't love me now, but what about in the future? You don't have someone else, do you? If we could start all over again, would you give me another chance? I looked out at the traffic flowing past outside the window. Time, it had been so long. It had healed all my self-doubt and scars, and handed me back a whole, complete Luciana. I had finally learned how to approach love as an equal. As for what comes next, who can say for sure? I leaned my head against the car window and smiled faintly. Let time tell,